all the body language that is not in a positive way. You know, when you play a Grand Slam final that you're going to be nervous.
Ferrero's departure has made the Alcaraz family structure impossible to ignore. Nadal, watching from retirement, Alcaraz's team closing ranks, his mother staying outside the public argument. That silence now carries unexpected weight. The claim that Nadal reveals what Virginia said in private has no verified recording behind it. Yet the missing quotation points toward a real question. Did she understand that the pressure surrounding Carlos had moved beyond healthy ambition? Ferrero admitted that he wanted to continue, while later describing the separation as a team decision involving contract terms. Carlos Sr. was never publicly named as the cause. Fans still connected his influence to the breakup because he had already crossed one visible line at Wimbledon. Carlos confirmed his father had probably filmed Djokovic's practice. Djokovic wanted greater privacy. Social media supplied the accusation that neither player fully made. That moment proved nothing about Virginia, but she knew how tennis ambition operated inside her home. Whether the father was going too far remains the suspicion driving this entire investigation. I genuinely want your first reaction, so subscribe and tell me who you trust. Now let us examine what the family never publicly explained. The first detail to understand is that Virginia Garcia never occupied the same place in Carlos's tennis life as her husband. Carlos Sr. understood technique, competition, rankings, and the difficult path from a local club in Murcia to the professional tour. Virginia represented the part of home that existed beyond those demands. She supported her son, attended important matches, and protected the ordinary family setting that Carlos kept returning to after becoming famous. That difference does not prove disagreement between the parents. It explains why her silence feels important whenever the sporting side of the family becomes controversial. Carlos Sr. could be questioned about tennis because tennis had always been his territory. Virginia's influence was harder to measure because it appeared through normality rather than strategy. Carlos continued living close to his family even after becoming the youngest men's world number one. He could carry a Babolat racket, compete in Nike clothing, wear a Rolex, and appear in campaigns connected to Louis Vuitton or Calvin Klein, yet home still removed those labels. His parents and brothers did not need the public version of Carlos Alcaraz. They already knew the boy who started playing at 4. That arrangement helped preserve his defining instinct. Alcaraz does not merely enjoy winning. His tennis depends on visible enjoyment. The drop shots, sudden changes of direction, improvised attacks, and smiles after impossible points come from a player who needs freedom to compete at his highest level. Restriction can sharpen him temporarily, but too much control threatens the quality that separates him from technically disciplined rivals. Nadal provides the unavoidable comparison. His greatness was built through routine, physical sacrifice, and an ability to accept discomfort without allowing it to become an excuse. Spain watched Nadal create that standard for 2 decades. When Alcaraz emerged, people immediately placed the same burden on him. The comparison sounded flattering, but it carried a hidden demand. Alcaraz was not simply expected to win major titles. He was expected to inherit Nadal's discipline, public conduct, national importance, and appetite for sacrifice. Every holiday became evidence. Every injury became a warning. Any defeat invited questions about whether he wanted greatness badly enough. Nadal understood that burden better than most people. His own career was shaped by strong family involvement, including the long influence of his uncle and former coach, Tony. Rafa eventually changed that professional arrangement without turning the decision into a public family war. He learned that gratitude does not remove the need for independence. That history makes Nadal relevant to the Alcaraz family question. It does not establish that Virginia privately approached him. No verified interview shows Nadal repeating her words. His role comes from experience. He knows what happens when a gifted teenager becomes a national project before he has fully developed an adult identity. Carlos Sr. also knew the cost of an unfinished tennis dream. He had played competitively and became deeply involved in the club, where his son began. When Carlos showed exceptional ability, his father helped place him in an environment capable of developing that talent. The decision to work with Juan Carlos Ferrero was not the act of a parent refusing outside authority. It showed that Carlos Sr. understood his son needed elite guidance. Ferrero then became far more than a technical employee. He helped turn an exciting teenager into a champion on every surface. Carlos described him as a coach and a friend. Their relationship included tactical instruction, emotional support, disagreement, and the difficult process of teaching a young star how to handle sudden fame. For years, that structure appeared balanced. Carlos Sr. remained the father with tennis knowledge. Virginia maintained the family home. Ferrero controlled the professional development. Carlos stood at the center, collecting trophies without losing the smile that made people feel close to him. The balance first looked publicly vulnerable during Wimbledon in 2023. Alcaraz arrived at that tournament carrying the pressure created by his Roland Garros semifinal against Djokovic. He had suffered severe cramping during that match, and Carlos later connected the physical collapse to nerves. His body had exposed the psychological distance between becoming world number one and defeating Djokovic on a major stage. Wimbledon offered a second opportunity almost immediately. Alcaraz moved through the draw while Djokovic pursued another title on the court he had controlled for years. Their potential final became the tournament's central story. The established king was waiting while the challenger had to prove that Paris had taught him something. Then the camera story appeared. Reports suggested that Carlos Sr. had filmed one of Djokovic's practice sessions. When reporters asked Alcaraz whether his father had done it, Carlos did not issue a complete denial. He said it was probably true and described his father as a major tennis fan who watched practice whenever possible. That answer changed the atmosphere because it acknowledged the action while rejecting the suspected motive. Carlos did not accept that the recording offered useful tactical information. His explanation presented the incident as enthusiasm from someone who loved watching tennis. Djokovic's response gave the controversy a different direction. He spoke about wanting more privacy during practice because players work on tactical details that could become useful to opponents. He did not publicly accuse Alcaraz of organizing an operation against him. Still, his concern gave fans enough material to turn an awkward situation into a moral dispute. The reaction became the real turning point. Once posts describing the incident as spying began circulating, Carlos Sr. stopped looking like a harmless tennis father to part of the audience. The camera became evidence of excessive involvement. People who already believed Alcaraz received special protection treated the recording as confirmation. Djokovic supporters saw an intrusion aimed at the defending champion. Other fans rejected that conclusion. They pointed out that tournament practice sessions were often visible to numerous people. Coaches regularly observed opponents, broadcasters captured training footage, and players entered matches with extensive video analysis. From that perspective, the word spying exaggerated an incident that produced no formal complaint, punishment, or proven advantage. The facts remained narrow. Carlos believed his father probably filmed the session. Djokovic valued training privacy. No authority established cheating. Nothing demonstrated that Alcaraz requested the footage or changed his match plan because of it. The meaning expanded beyond those facts. Carlos went on to meet Djokovic in the final and defeated him across 5 sets. That victory ended Djokovic's long Wimbledon reign and answered the psychological question left by Roland Garros. Alcaraz had faced the same opponent under greater pressure without suffering the same physical collapse. His performance should have closed the camera story. Instead, victory made the earlier suspicion easier to preserve. People who wanted a scandal could connect the recording to the result, even without evidence connecting one to the other. The father had filmed the king and the son had removed him from the throne. The sequence sounded convincing enough to travel faster than the explanation. That was the point at which Virginia's silence began attracting a meaning she had never publicly given it. She did not condemn her husband. She did not accuse him of interfering. No credible report showed her warning Carlos Sr. after Wimbledon. Yet viewers could imagine the private discomfort of a mother watching a family action become international news while her son prepared for the biggest match of his life. Virginia knew the personalities involved. She knew her husband's attachment to tennis, her son's sensitivity to pressure, and the difference between Carlos enjoying competition and Carlos carrying everybody else's expectations. That knowledge is real. The words assigned to her are not. The distinction becomes essential because the controversy did not disappear when Wimbledon ended. It changed form. Carlos's choices away from the court gradually became another argument about control. The clearest example emerged through his decision to visit Ibiza after the painful Roland Garros defeat in 2023. Members of his professional circle worried about the timing and about the message it might send. Alcaraz believed the break allowed him to disconnect from tennis before Wimbledon. His victory over Djokovic made the trip difficult to criticize on results alone. Carlos had stepped away, recovered emotionally, and returned capable of beating the strongest grass court player of his generation. The outcome supported his belief that enjoyment was not the enemy of commitment. However, one successful decision did not end the larger debate. Ferrero had coached a player capable of becoming one of the greatest in history. That possibility naturally changed the standard. A normal 20-year-old could travel, celebrate, and decide his schedule around personal happiness. A potential all-time champion would be judged against Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer. That conflict was presented openly in the Netflix documentary about Alcaraz's 2024 season. Carlos wanted to live according to his own understanding of balance. Ferrero and the professional team considered what his choices might mean across a long career. The documentary allowed viewers to see friction that traditional tournament interviews usually hide. Social media again became part of the story, rather than a place where the story was merely discussed. Clips about Ibiza circulated without the full context of training, recovery, or the Wimbledon result that followed. Some fans praised Carlos for refusing to become a machine. Others treated the footage as proof that he lacked Nadal's hunger. Carlos answered through his established identity. He did not pretend that tennis was his only reason for living. He wanted major titles, but he also wanted experiences belonging to someone his age. His position was risky because success protected it. Whenever he won, balance looked intelligent. Whenever he lost, the same balance could be renamed distraction. Ferrero later softened the harshest interpretation. He explained that the issue was not simply partying. Carlos needed periods when he could stop thinking about tennis and live like a young person. That clarification mattered because it showed that disagreement had not erased understanding. By then, however, the audience had learned to look for competing centers of authority around Alcaraz. Ferrero represented professional restriction. Carlos represented personal freedom. Carlos Sr. remained close enough to attract suspicion. Virginia stayed quiet enough for outsiders to assign her whichever position made their theory work. The family question became more intense when Ferrero and Alcaraz ended their partnership in December 2025. The timing surprised the tennis world because the partnership had produced extraordinary results. Ferrero had helped Carlos win major titles on hard court, grass, and clay. Their work had survived injuries, tactical problems, arguments over scheduling, and the pressure created by Sinner's rise. Ferrero's farewell contained one phrase that invited speculation. He wished he could have continued. That did not sound like a coach who had simply lost interest. It created an information gap. An online discussion filled it immediately. Some people blamed the father, others connected the separation to the disagreements shown in the documentary. A more dramatic theory claimed that the family wanted greater control over Carlos and removed the coach who had been willing to challenge him. The verified explanation was less explosive. Ferrero later discussed contractual disagreements and described the outcome as a team decision. Carlos understood where the talks were heading. Neither man publicly presented the breakup as a personal betrayal, and Ferrero did not identify Carlos Sr. as the person responsible. Carlos also maintained that the chapter had closed mutually. He expressed gratitude for the 7 years they spent together and credited Ferrero with helping create the player he became. Their public statements showed sadness, but sadness does not prove a family coup. Still, the camera incident changed how later facts were interpreted. Without Wimbledon 2023, Carlos Sr. might have remained a supportive father in the background of a contractual breakdown. After the recording controversy, fans already possessed an image of him crossing into competitive territory. Ferrero's departure allowed that image to return. This is where the supposed private warning from Virginia becomes attractive. It supplies the missing witness. The mother sees the father's influence from inside the home. She recognizes that Ferrero is losing authority. She turns to Nadal because he understands tennis families. Nadal eventually reveals her concern. It is a powerful storyline. It also lacks the evidence required to present it as an event. No authenticated quotation establishes what Virginia allegedly said. No date identifies when the conversation occurred. No location places Nadal and Virginia together for such an exchange. No recording allows the audience to judge the language. The claim travels through videos repeating the same conclusion without producing an original source. That does not leave us with an empty story. It reveals the real one. Virginia's position matters because Carlos's career contains a continuing argument over ownership. His father helped begin the journey. Ferrero shaped the champion. Sponsors turned his image into a global product. Spanish tennis treated him as Nadal's successor. Fans demanded access to his choices. Carlos kept insisting that the final life still belonged to him. Nadal's presence makes that argument sharper. Rafa represents the reward and cost of total commitment. His records turned sacrifice into a standard that later Spanish players would be measured against. Alcaraz admires him, but imitation would destroy the instinct that makes Carlos different. The established king controlled matches through discipline and endurance. The hungry challenger disrupts them through invention and joy. Carlos does not need to reject Nadal's example. He needs enough independence to learn from it without becoming trapped inside it. Carlos Sr. may have gone too far when he filmed Djokovic's practice, especially when judged against Novak's reasonable desire for privacy. That conclusion can be debated from the confirmed facts. It does not prove that he controlled his son's career, forced Ferrero out, or ignored a private warning from Virginia. The camera showed poor boundaries more clearly than malicious intent. It created an appearance that followed the family into every later controversy. Once that appearance existed, silence no longer looked neutral. Virginia probably understood the danger of that perception. She had watched Carlos move from a local child with a racket to a celebrity carrying major brands and national expectations. She knew that every family choice could be interpreted as strategy. She also knew the young man behind the public image needed somewhere that did not treat him as an investment. That is the strongest meaning her silence can honestly carry. It represents protection without supplying a fabricated confession. Nadal reveals something through his example rather than through an unverified quotation. His career shows that family guidance can build greatness, but even successful structures must eventually change. It also shows that historic achievement extracts a physical and emotional price that nobody else can volunteer to pay for the player. Ferrero's departure did not prove the father had taken control. It proved that the structure around Alcaraz had entered a new stage. Carlos was no longer the 15-year-old prospect who needed adults to design every part of his future. He had become a champion responsible for deciding what kind of career he wanted. That choice will continue to divide fans. If he wins, his independence will be praised as wisdom. If injuries or defeats interrupt him, critics will return to Ibiza, Ferrero, the family, and the camera at Wimbledon. The evidence may remain unchanged, but the interpretation will follow the scoreboard. The deeper truth is more complicated than one private accusation. No verified statement shows Virginia turning against her husband. What she understood was the pressure building inside a family where parental support, professional ambition, commercial power, and national expectation had become almost impossible to separate. The father may have crossed one public boundary. The professional team may have demanded sacrifices Carlos did not always accept. The tennis world certainly tried to turn him into another Nadal before allowing him to define himself. Carlos's response has remained consistent. He wants greatness, but he wants it through joy. Protecting that instinct does not make him unserious. It may be the only way he can survive the career everyone else has planned for him. Subscribe if you want tennis stories that test the loudest claims against the facts, and tell me whether Carlos Sr. crossed the line, or whether the real pressure came from everyone surrounding his son.